Yeah. So an external landlord, it is more diverse for our portfolio, which brings less risk for us if anybody leaves.
Yeah.
They also usually don't have, when they have big asks, they don't always understand what they're asking for. So you can explain to them what they're asking for and why it doesn't really work. With investors, it can be harder because they do have larger portfolios. They tend to have a little bit more pull or feel they have more pull when it comes to making changes that benefit them. Um, so I do like to work with investors, but I don't really want to have a large percentage of my portfolio with any whales.
Today I'll be speaking with Janet Fields, owner of Oak Trust Properties based out of Charleston, South Carolina. Janet has grown her property management business to over 450 doors. And in today's episode, she talks to me about how they grew primarily through acquisitions of other property management companies. She also talks about her experience buying into the family business and what they're doing today to continue to grow the business. So without further ado, let's get straight to the interview.
I am a Charleston native. My family moved here back in the 80s, and my dad started a real estate company, which ended up becoming a property management company that really encompassed our whole life. You can't just have real estate and not have it affect your whole family. So I grew up around it. My dad started acquiring his own properties. I helped them with admin after they started a company, and we do flips and stuff in the summer. So I was always around sales conversations, always around somebody being creative and trying to solve problems, working with people and trying to be of service, trying to just meet everybody's needs all the time on short timelines without spending as much money as possible for everyone. So yeah, I was just fully immersed almost immediately.
Got it. So
It's
you're
a good
almost
time.
groomed from birth to be in property management.
Yes.
Got
It's
it.
funny though, it never came up that like, hey, I'm one of three, I'm the youngest. They never like, you can do this in the future, or this could be your business. That never came up. So when I finally did reach out, my dad ended up saying like, hey, I never thought any of you would be interested. And I was like, we never knew it was an option. So
Yeah,
that was interesting to hear and learn that sometimes as parents, we might not think to offer.
definitely happens. My father also has a family business, but for me, he told me you're not allowed to go into this. So I kind of had to go and figure out my own route. So a little bit different, but it's also
Yeah.
because they're in a dying industry. Um, so when you came on board, where was the company at that point in time?
Yeah, so the company was small at that point. There was three people, including my dad. So my dad was a broker. He really just did sales, and a assistant had been with him for 5, 10 years, and she had started managing the office, managing tenants, and then we had a receptionist that walked in, and I ended up for walk-ins and phone calls and handling maintenance. And I ended up taking that position for the walk-ins and processing applications. And I knew nothing about working in an office at that point. I was a field tech, rough around the edges. Um, and when I started working on payroll or collecting real checks from the office, I was doing remodeling jobs and painting at first.
Okay.
And then rekeys. Rekeys are my favorite. That's great money for a kid.
Gotcha. So at what point did you end up taking over ownership?
So 2014, just a little before 2014, I went on maternity leave. And when I came back to the office about 3 months later, my parents had identified and started an acquisition for me to take over. I my parents are amazing, obviously. They really set me up for success. They knew more people coming into the business that they would need to bring on more doors, and they wanted me to have my own doors. So they're like, here's this chaos. Let's manage it. And we didn't want to join forces. So we had two books. I had my own book of business. My father had his. I paid him for admin. So we split the admin cost. We ran our own books, and it was complicated for a while because we didn't know how to leverage all the technology we had to make it easy for our shared employees to do their job. So we made a lot of messes. Um,
So
and
what
then after that, go
what did
ahead.
that look like when they acquired the new doors? Like, were you managing X number of properties and your father was managing X number of properties? Is that kind of how that looked?
Not even yet. So it's interesting, family coming into the business, sometimes you don't know your place yet, like your official place, especially in this situation.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't have a place and I don't think they knew where they wanted me to go. So it was my job to find where I fit. And that was very uncomfortable. Um, that was interesting. So I started digging into the books and how we were spending money and how we were getting things done, how we were communicating with people. And I noticed like a few small things that tenants weren't being treated with as like a needed part of the party. They weren't being treated like an asset or somebody who brings something to the table. So that was something that was interesting because they've been in the business much longer that it was different. So now like a mindset shift had entered in and I wanted to make things more customer service based, talking about serving them as well. But yeah, I didn't have a spot. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? I feel like I need to organize this. We didn't have systems and processes because it was mom and pop startup. So it was a mess. I didn't know where I belonged.
Got it. And let's say today, is your father still involved? Do you have the full ownership of the business? What does that look like in present?
I ended up buying him out probably 18 months ago.
Okay.
And that was a long, hard, complicated conversation. Um, Recently, I listened to a podcast where they talked about succession and how the most successful successions go best when the old CEO or founder steps completely out and lets the new one take their place. And he wasn't emotionally ready for that. So that was like a 4-year process. And
Wow.
it was really painful for our family. And we tried to keep it out of the family, but it did become painful. And we'd have to take breaks and come back to the table and discuss. But he didn't know what he wanted. So he didn't know how to put a timeline on
Got it. Okay. And then as of 18 months ago, now you're, let's say, the chief in command. There's no more
it. Yeah.
impact.
So yeah, he had been a silent partner since he had gotten sick right before our 2018 acquisition.
Okay.
Um, so he was already really not in the office at that point. He would come in maybe once a month for meetings and stuff, and he would always just be checking the books, but he wasn't really active in operations or day to day.
Got it. Okay. So let's shift a little bit and talk kind of about your growth. If I'm not mistaken, when you first came on, you guys were much smaller than you are today. What are some of the strategies that you guys have implemented to grow? I know you mentioned an acquisition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have traditionally grown through acquisitions. My dad did a few before I came on, and then together we did two more. So that's been the biggest strategy for growth for us. It's a quick cash injection. It's pretty exciting too, and we both like change, so that's fun and good problems to solve. So it's chaotic, especially when you're bringing two different cultures together. Even if you're bringing not bringing employees, you're bringing the business culture over and those clients' cultures over. Um, it's pretty rough just dealing with all of that. People that didn't make this decision now they're being forced into a relationship that they didn't quite want. So trying to manage that was interesting without having an example set forth before us to do it. And now being a part of the organization NARPM and being connected with other property managers, before I do something crazy like that, I can reach out and say, hey, how did you do this? Do you have a few documents for me to like base this on? So we had no plan and we just went into it um, baptism by fire and just got it done.
Got it.
Just
What
putting in hours and slogging through.
what size were the companies that you acquired?
They're usually between 200 and 350.
Yeah, is that kind of the sweet spot that you guys are comfortable with at this point?
Yeah, it's also what's available in our Charleston market and with people in the same software or run things similarly or um, people aging out of business sort of thing. So it just kind of it's
And
worked out that way.
do you outwardly go and try to find those acquisitions, or do they just sort of happen organically?
They have happened organically. My dad is just a really nice person. He's really sweet, and I tend to go down the more mainstream path of today, where you your website and your SEO and content and X fields to assist me to go get those leads.
Gotcha.
I'm not an expert in there. I don't.
Yeah. So at this point, from what it sounds like, the primary levers for growth were first acquisitions. You acquired multiple businesses, and now you're starting to focus more so on, say, generating doors organically as well through your website, your SEO, and online marketing. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yep, that's it.
Cool. So you're obviously in a competitive market, being in Charleston. There's a lot of property management companies there. What are some of the things that Oak Trust Properties is able to do to differentiate themselves from, the other dozen property management companies down the street?
That's a really good question that we struggle with daily, unfortunately. There's so many great property management companies around here, and then there's also ones that, could use some help. But we tend to work with accidental owners, and accidental owners, they have a lot to learn. So we attempt to work with them and teach them what to expect, that risk is going to happen. It is going to cost money. This is a long-term investment, and trying to be upfront and honest about all those things and the things that we cannot deliver or will not deliver because we know that it's not worthwhile for the amount of effort put forth for on any of the parties. Just being able to say those things, I think, helps align us. The other things we do is I like to be active in the community. I like to give back. We donate to the schools. We volunteer Habitat for Humanity. We donate for Christmas and Thanksgiving, deliver turkeys, all the things. I love to volunteer at gardens. I have a nonprofit for a garden foundation where we help sustainable gardens with schools and churches and stuff like that. We just started it, but I love interacting with the community and helping them out, helping them meet their goals.
And you find from just being out there in the community, naturally, you meet more people, you network, more people know about your business, and that ends up actually turning into business, even though that's maybe not even the main intention.
Exactly. It's not the main intention, but going out and getting the reps in with that same group of people, it's basically the same as marketing. You're putting yourself out there. They know what's behind you and what you do to put food on the table, and they want to help you just like we want to help them.
Awesome. I mean, it's a win-win on both ends. You get to help the community, and then there's the added benefit that it ends up helping your business in the long run also.
Yeah.
So obviously you've been in property management for some time now. What would you say were some of the pivotal moments in your business that required big decisions to be made, or where maybe you hit this door count, you were like, you know what, things are just not running smoothly and you had to fix something? Can you tell us a little bit about those types of situations?
I think it was the acquisition between 500 to like 700 to 800. When we added about 200 to 300 more properties on at that point, major changes and major breaks started happening. We thought we had processes down, but you would talk to somebody in a shared office and they would give you two different processes. And you're like, well, what's going on? So that was a lot of clarity. At that point, we ended up bringing over employees with an acquisition and having two different cultures clash and not understand each other. That was interesting. Me having to learn manager skills, that was a really hard road. I made so many mistakes and probably looked like an A so many times that I wish I could have been handed a book on that sooner. I think there's the hard thing about the hard thing that has helped out with that. Yeah, I think just the massive change.
You mentioned the hard thing about hard things. You're talking about the book?
Yes, I love that book.
You found that had a big impact when it came to your managerial skills?
Yes, it did. It helped me address the situation sooner. I wish I read the book before I needed it, but I don't think it happens that way for a reason. So there's a lot of conversations that I got coached through hindsight, and I was like, oh, wow, that would have turned better, or some strategic things I could have done differently. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that's why it failed, but I was just too naive that I didn't know why this wouldn't work, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, reading has been great. I think in 2018, I really dived down in books to like fill in a lot of gaps, and um, it's been a huge change. It's been
Any
great.
specific book recommendations that really changed
Yeah,
your
some of my favorite books are one that I just read recently that not recently. Okay. Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. I wish I read that sooner. Um, that's been helping me with taxes and just overall thinking money strategy, because some of that language is, it's just so hard to shift gears and learn about something completely different. It takes so much longer. Um, all the business books. I just wish I would have read all the business books sooner. Um, I love Good to Great. I love
like
Seth Godin, Tim Ferriss. Um, there's so many. Oh, who doesn't like, what is it, Carnegie with the Friends, Making Friends?
influence friends and
Yes, like such a great book. It's so old, but I mean, it's so perfect. All of those books, they've just helped me so much in working with people.
yeah. No, that's I'm a big reader myself, and I find, yeah, I went to university, I got an education, I worked, but when it comes to actually running a business, it's something that you don't really learn in school. It's something that you kind of learn by doing, and you
Mhm.
learn by talking to other people that have been there. And the best way to talk to people that have been there, other than maybe going to a conference, is by reading their stories, right? So definitely, I share the same sentiment when it comes to books. Huge life changer for me as well.
Oh, I am so
So
impactful.
so now, from what I gather, you're at a roughly over 500 doors now. Is that yeah?
Yeah, we're about between 400 and 500 right now.
Okay. What does your team look like? Well, how many team members do you have? What are their roles? What does it take to run a company that's managing around 500 doors?
Um, I think there's a wide range of what it can look like, but here under our hood, it looks like 8 people, 3 property managers, 1 maintenance coordinator, 1 phone receptionist who is transitioning to an assistant property manager, 1 field tech, 1 EA to support me because I absolutely need that. And then there's
The
me.
EA, you
So
mean executive assistant?
yes, yes. Um, so we're working on getting more assistant property managers in the next couple of months, a front end BDM to help support me, and then 1 more maintenance. But that's all with growth.
And right now, is it you that handles all the sales?
Not right now, but I need to. That's I'm working your transition. 1 property manager. Well, we had somebody who handled leasing and BDM, but it was just incoming BDM,
Okay.
which really isn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll be transitioning to that.
Got it. Okay. And in terms of your ideal client, you mentioned accidental landlords. Is that happening almost by accident? Is it something you directly go after? Why is it that you prefer accidental landlords than, let's say, an investor that has 20 properties?
Yeah. So an accidental landlord, it is more diverse for our portfolio, which brings less risk for us if anybody leaves.
Yeah.
They also usually don't have, when they have big asks, they don't always understand what they're asking for. So you can explain to them what they're asking for and why it doesn't really work. With investors, it can be harder because they do have larger portfolios. They tend to have a little bit more pull or feel they have more pull when it comes to making changes that benefit them. Um, so I do like to work with investors, but I don't really want to have like, a large percentage of my portfolio with any whales, because that's just, it's not the best experience. And I'm sure it's not great.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you kind of have like what the Costco risk, right? If you rely, like tons of companies out there rely on their entire business being run by Costco sending them orders. One day Costco comes and they're like, you know what? You're going to half your price. And they're like, well, if we do that, we're going to be losing money. They say, okay, we're using a different supplier. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
they lost their entire business overnight. And it happens over and over and over again. And it's the same thing with property management. If you're relying on one or two huge investors, two things. One, you kind of have more of a job than you have a business, I would argue.
Yes.
And then the second thing is, yeah, that there's a huge risk in terms of if they leave. especially even if you go to sell your business, that's also
Yeah.
risk, right? Like if I'm a buyer of a property management company, I'd
Ooh, I
much
see that.
rather have a company where it's diversified. If they lose one client, it's 1% of their revenue or something like that. Versus that, oh, they lose this one client, they just lost 25% of the business. I'm not going to pay as much for a company that's built like that. And unfortunately, we've actually seen it happen countless times. Like we had one person that we knew that one investor had 500 doors. His
Hmm.
company basically folded overnight when this investor decided to pull their business from him. So it's definitely something that you do want to consider in terms of building out your portfolio. You're at a much higher risk if you're relying on one investor that has a ton of properties. So
Yes.
I agree with you on that. Um, so obviously you've been in property management for long enough that you probably have, if I had to guess, a good story. No, no good stories for us.
Okay. I do have some good stories, but at this point, like, you've heard them all, it feels like, or they're not. Sometimes they get you riled up because they're exciting. So there's a few. I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, we had a illegal casino in one of our properties.
That's
That was that was a bizarre one. There were the pull down electronic machines just like against the wall, a couple kids Capri Suns, and an air mattress. And the SWAT team kicked down the door, because they got busted. And that's how we found out. Typically, that's how it does find, or you do find out these things,
yeah,
unfortunately. We've had bees. I always think bees are interesting because you have to get like a special beekeeper because they're protected. You can't just go kill them. Honeybees. And then also there's hundreds of pounds of honeycomb in the walls when this happens. And
okay.
because of the pheromones, they're likely to come back next year or sooner. So I always think that's interesting with insects. The same thing with like swarming. We have Formosa termites, I believe that's the one, and they swarm all over a certain time of year and they'll come into houses. And I've heard horror stories where they'll come into the house and just there's bugs everywhere. And those are also come back. So that's not fun. And then we've had a few, I think we've had 2 real estate agents in the last year or so that have sublet our properties as Airbnbs from under us. And which is totally against our lease. And that was very interesting to navigate with townhome HOAs and Airbnb online, and your attorney, all the things. And what was really cool, except for it wasn't for us, it was actually horrible. The someone at that apartment or townhomes ended up putting our property manager's personal name and information on the doors and started saying that like they were being disparaging, and all this stuff. And they posted it like on everybody's cars and everybody's doors. And it was just like, not even Oak Trust. It was just like that one person. I was just like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, employee. I am so sorry.
Oh boy.
So
The-
yeah, I was like,
yeah,
if we need to help, we'll help. But I mean, I can't prevent it. I can't believe it happened.
yeah.
Um,
The casino one is the one I've never heard actually. I've heard a lot of stories over the years, but casino that's a new one. So no,
we've had ghosts too. Have you had ghost stories?
ghosts?
Yes.
No.
It's always like a little embarrassing to even say, but anyway, we've had people report ghosts, probably 2 or 3 different houses. And these houses, I don't like to have houses that are older. So these are like, you know, 80s, 90s, and newer homes. So we had one person that called and said that, they thought they had something weird going on in their house. And my husband was actually property manager at that time, and he went to go do an inspection over there. And when he was walking inspection, the tenant, the lady was there, and she was telling him how when she walked past the bathroom, like she was pushed into it, like just, and no one was here. She was forced into it. And she had a picture on her phone where she had like scratches and marks from it. So that was pretty crazy. And then the other one we had, it was somebody that was telling us about they were hearing voices in a back bedroom, and then they'd hear like ringing and stuff sometimes, and they couldn't figure out. It was a single family home. They couldn't figure out what was going on. And they said they had a baby or a toddler in the same back bedroom, and then at night when they are left alone, like now they've started screaming. Now they're in this new house. And you're like, yeah, whatever, changes. So I go talk to my dad about it. I was like, yeah, we got this weird, crazy story. He's like, oh my God, the back bedroom. Are you kidding? Like the husband died in there. Like that was the back, like that was his hospice room. So like, it was like he was taking the phones and moving them around and taking wedding rings and moving them around. They're so weird to hear those things. I'm not like a person who believes in that stuff, but when you hear people, like, you're just like what's happening? You know, it's interesting. People love hearing.
I unless you experience it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So obviously you've dealt with your fair share of interesting experiences in property management. I guess at this point, like, what does a typical day look like for you?
Oh gosh. My days are pretty boring most of the time. I check all the accounts, all the credit cards, make sure I see what's going in and out. Nothing that's not supposed to be going out. Check in with my EA. Actually, she checks in with me, tells me if I have any appointments or meetings. I am not the best at keeping a schedule, so she'll email me or not email, text me throughout the day. She's like, "Hey, reminder, you have a meeting." We do quick morning huddles as a team 3 times weekly, and that's just like a 15-minute check-in to say, you know, what's your top 3 things that you're going to accomplish today or this week? Um,
And you do that with the entire team?
yeah, yeah.
Everyone goes one by one and says their top 3 goals for the week type of thing.
Yep. So we have a page that we go through all the time, and it's just open items. There'll be 3 there, and I have to move them over when they're completed. So we can all just kind of see clarity going down the line, what everybody has. It's really easy. I review my escalated issues, things that might attract an attorney or legal fees. I want to hop in front of that and see if I already know how to handle the situation. And if I don't, I start reaching out to the attorney and say, hey, let's get some guidance on this. And then I review and approve a lot of processes, which is extremely boring. Not my favorite part of the job. I love coaching Fridays. Those are fun. That's when I get to be the property manager and they get to be clients who are, you know, having objections. So I get to sit in the hot seat and they rapid fire at me and I try to, you know, give them solutions and then we go backwards and they be the property manager and I. So we're practicing the conversations, we're working that muscle. And that's always really good. It's good for team building too. And then I have bi-weekly coaching and accountability calls. About every 2 years, it seems like I get a new coach. And those are really good to keep me on track and healthy, all those things.
It's a business coach?
Yeah, business coach. Yeah, I didn't go to school for business. And I feel like that does help fill in the gaps. And like you said, somebody who's seen it before or has experience, it's nice. Like just pay for their time. So much easier than sometimes finding somebody otherwise. Like sometimes you gotta pay for the time.
Yeah. Where do you find your business coaches?
The first business coach I just found through like a real estate page. They contacted me. That one didn't work as long. They wanted a piece of my profits, and I was like, absolutely not. Right. For the rest of my life, I don't think so. Then
Listening, I would not recommend going that route.
yeah, no, that's a bad move. And then I found that person actually recommended I find a local group of entrepreneurs. And he said, like, you know, maybe you would like one of women. And I was like, okay. And I found one immediately that I did love, a local or a local entrepreneur group for women. It was amazing. I learned so much. She helped me structure my thoughts, ask better questions, help me strategically, things that I had no idea how to do. And then after that one, I reached out to another friend, a CEO who works in the marijuana industry, which is really fun. So she works over like many states and does a lot of high level stuff at like startups and stuff. So I asked her for some recommendations one time. She's like, "Oh, I have one," and she connected me with that one, and that was really cool. That worked for about 2 years again. And this one I met through Narbump that I'm with now. Deb Newell, she's great.
I know, for sure. No, Deb is great. So outside of property management, like what are you doing with the cash flow you generate from your property management company? How are you investing that? Are you reinvesting it in the business? What does that look like?
Well, it looks like John Reeder's retirement plan. That's my dad. So buying the company looks like big payments going out the door, but that's part of it. So acquisitions come with cost. Other things I invest in is retirement. I have had one property of my own, but it didn't really work out. I bought it in 2008. So that was not the best year.
Yeah.
Crashed like 2 months later.
Okay. So not a good time of 2008. Not
It
to,
wasn't really,
yeah.
yeah, it was confusing. I was trying to tell my dad, I was like, Dad, I'm losing $500 a month on this property. He's like, it's fine. Like that won't happen for long. And I was like, I don't know. It's been 2 years.
So you learned by doing it the hard way.
Yeah. He's like, this never happens. I was like, it does now.
Yeah.
Um, so I haven't got back into it. Last year and this year, I've been looking for the right properties. I'm working with flip groups, kind of talking to them, and it's just hard to get the numbers to work right now because of all the price points. People are looking for the sneaky properties and the numbers to work, so they're just not really there right
Yeah, for sure. It's especially with interest rates, it kind of threw everything off. You still have home prices where they were at when interest rates were low, and
now. Yeah.
interest rates now are high. So it's a tough market for investors for sure. Any departing words of advice for other property management company owners out there that are hoping to one day get to your level of success, or maybe that already have a level of success, but something that you might be able to give a little bit of your wisdom to?
Um, that's a hard one. So I think you need to be adaptive. Um, Definitely be willing to make changes. Um, Go ahead and start building those relationships. Reach out to other property managers, other people in business who have been successful, so you can get there. Read those books, listen to those podcasts, and then the success doesn't come overnight. It definitely requires patience, um, perseverance, maybe love for pain and discomfort. If uh, Get used to discomfort. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, you're not moving forward. So just get used to being uncomfortable. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be quiet.
Any specific podcasts that you recommend? Any favorite?
Right now, I've been listening to Tim Ferriss. That's been good. I typically listen to Audible books. Think I used to listen to the MF CEO. That's a fun time. And then let's see. Oh, coaching for leaders. And I like to look for I can't think of her name. Brenda, gosh, Bernard. I can't anyway, sorry, I can't think of her name. Brene Brown. There you go. Brene Brown.
Yeah.
I love her. She's funny. She's so excellent. She works with Fortune 50 companies. So she's like a wealth of knowledge. She's tapping into that for free. It's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janet. Really appreciate your time. This is awesome. And for anyone that would like to connect with you offline, is there a best place to do so?
Yeah, sure. So oaktrustproperties.com. We got Oak Trust Properties on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn, and we probably have a floundering TikTok somewhere, but we don't need to go there. Yeah, shoot us a message, send us email us, call, whatever. We're here for you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.